All right, I think we'll get moving. It's nice to see everybody. It feels like it's been like a year since we had our last meeting, even though it's only been a couple weeks. And there's a lot of work that's been going on. And so just want to thank everybody for the tremendous amount of work between our meetings to help us get to this next, I think, more exciting phase for all of us, where we're talking about solutions and recommendations. Um, and I want to note that Chair Port is unable to join us today, but we've discussed the agenda and moving forward today, and so I'll be at the helm for the balance of the meeting, and also want to acknowledge our LCC staff and MAD consultants who are here today: Evelyn Weiner, Mina Zhang, Katie Hatt, Jenna Lane, and Sam Grant, who is joining us for the first time. So welcome, Sam, and everybody on the LCC and MAD teams. Just a little overview of the day. We are going to dig into the recommendations and have opportunities for each small group to tell us a little bit about the product of their work. And then we're going to go through recommendations one by one fairly quickly and do basically a gut check on these. And what that means is we'll have a Zoom poll up where folks will be able to rate the recommendations 0 to 5. And really, the goal isn't to sort of feel like we're voting on these. It's really to just kind of get that gut check, and especially to surface if there are recommendations where there's the folks in the task force have big questions or big challenges, so that we can surface that, have a little discussion, and that'll help our small groups continue to do some work as we sort of, keep molding these recommendations into a finished product. And so that is largely the work, and we have enough recommendations where that might sound like, oh geez, that's not much, but it'll take us a bit to get through all the quality recommendations we've went through. And so that is, in broad strokes, the big duties of the day. But first, just some housekeeping. Is there a motion to approve the October 30th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
And the minutes
Aye.
pass. All right. So got that taken care of. And just a few comments just on the work ahead here. I hope that folks had a chance to take a look at the posted recommendations from the groups. There's a lot there. From my perspective, what I'm seeing is kind of a mix of kind of the big systems level challenges that we're trying to address and seek solutions, but then also, specific targeted acute ways that we can address the big challenges we're facing. And I think it's critical for this task force that we have recommendations that do both, that really recognize the scope of the challenge, bring forward the kind of the big picture path forward, and also pulling out every way that we can in both short-term and long-term, bring public policy solutions to bear that can make a difference here. And so that is, at least from my perspective, the lay of the land, and we want to provide opportunity through the process today and otherwise to kind of gut check that with all of you as well to determine, where we're at, where we're headed. So I think we can go to the next slide. This is just a quick update on the task force meeting flow. You can see that we're I really would note November and December here, and then in between, there's going to be a lot of work to in this meeting really start to develop those recommendations, surface what issues there might be, then through November and December refine and get to a place in our December meeting where we're molding that clay even further. And so, and then would note that we're looking at 2 meetings in January to make sure that we have the time and space to get our recommendations and report in order. go to the next slide. This is just our operating agreement slide. I'll just let folks review that for a minute or a second or two. And then we can go to the next slide. And just a reminder, thank you for all that have reviewed the documents that have been submitted and posted by our LCC staff. Thank you for posting those, and encourage folks to review those topics. And thank you for everyone that submitted information. It's really adds sort of, I think, really valuable context that'll help us in this next phase here. Next slide.
We actually don't have a slide for the last update.
Oh, yes.
Public testimony. Yep.
A quick update on written public testimony. We are going to establish a process and a means for those keying into the task force to submit written testimony now that we're getting to a phase where we're having more for folks to react to. So individuals and organizations that would like to submit testimony should email Evelyn Weiner at LCC by December 4th. This information is also posted on the task force website meetings page. And so for folks watching, and then for task force members that in your sort of networks and what have you, don't hesitate to email that out or encourage folks to review and provide written feedback by December 4th. And I think collecting that will help us, get being even stronger and more pointed as we get to the next phase of this. All right. So now we're going to do some brief status reports from each of our small groups. And we're hoping that one person from your small group could give us a 2 to 3 to 4 minute overview. We're going to get into the specific content later on, but just want to provide an opportunity for the small group to just discuss, what's working well, what challenges in your area have you really targeted, and just a word or two about, how you feel about your recommendations, sort of the scope and big focus where your recommendations sit. And so first, we're going to hear from the Administrative Policy and Tools Group. Is there someone that would want to come off mute and give us that update?
I can share as a member of the group. We've made some good progress and have 9 recommendations that are in the packet that Evelyn sent around. And our group really focused on certainly funding, but we spent also a fair amount of time talking about lack of process in the system. So when we were evaluating what was challenging in our discussions, we quickly pivoted to, but how would that work? So we spent some time on that and really could benefit from more time as we were digging into that. That's where we landed in our group. I think otherwise our conversations have gone well and felt like it was a lot of work in the last assignment, but we got through it.
All right. Next, let's hear from the Financing Tools and Programs Group. Is there anybody from that group that would be able to share?
I'm happy to jump in. Hi, Andrea. Andrea Brennan. My work group included, I think, James Lenhoff and Chris Sherman, who I think are here, and then Nancy Cashman, who I think is going to be joining late this morning, and then Miranda Walker. So I would say that what's gone really well is I don't know if these were randomly chosen or how, but I thought it was a really good mix of different perspectives on our work group. So I thought we had some really great conversation. Really could have, I think all of us in that work group could talk about this all day long and all of the nuance there. So, I think we did our best to, we advanced 10 different recommendations, and those 10, some of them are pretty robust and they involve like many components. And even so, we acknowledge that there's a lot of detail. The devil is going to be in the detail, and there's a lot of details to work out with these recommendations, and there's a lot of nuance. And so that's what I would say. I don't know, James or Chris, you have anything to add?
Andre, I think that was a great overview. James Lenhoff with Minnesota Housing. And what we were both trying to balance was this aspect of where there's funding needs, big and small, but also what are some non-funding considerations, just recognizing that resources are not unlimited in this space, and what might that look like as well, both of which are challenging, but in different ways. And Andre, you said it, the devil's in the details for a lot of them, and how they can play out.
That's great. Next is the insurance group, and I was on this group, so I'll lead us off. Our group was myself, Peter Brickwitty with the Department of Commerce. We had Kizzy Downs and Aaron Cocking as well on our group. I would say our group is, we spent some time talking about the deep challenge facing our providers, and I feel like that part is clear enough. But the solutions and what sort of levers we have at the state level are, that's probably where we spent the most time, really kind of pondering what can we do, what kind of information we have. So we have 3 recommendations, some of which involve just collecting more information so that we can have more informed public policy discourse on this issue, as well as a discussion about whether we need new sort of funding programs that are specifically targeted in ways that can address what's both an access and a cost issue in terms of insurance for our nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing providers. But would invite any of our other group members to say a word or two as well. Or I can take the silence as affirmation that I just did a bang up job there. So
great job, Representative.
Yeah, thank you. All right. And finally, let's hear from the Systems Change Group.
I guess I will represent Quiet. We had Elizabeth, Scott, Mai Chung, and Mary Thompson in our group. I think broadly there were 4 recommendations with bullets in there. There was stuff around how to use the ISG in a more transparent process. There was a lot of discussions between LAHA and SAHA and the difference in greater Minnesota and in the metro, and how do we streamline that and can keep the flexibility of greater Minnesota and kind of get rid of the complexities in the urban core. To collectively they could work really well together if we could take the things that are great with both of those. And then also talking about the extended use and how to do regulatory changes to that beyond the 15 years for LIHTC. So that was kind of broadly lots of conversation. I think the iceberg, right? I feel like there's so much more work that could be done around narrowing down and getting clearer on it. But I think we did a lot of, we had some good thinking and we're pretty aligned on it. So if anybody in the group wants to hop in, please do.
I think everyone's just so excited to get into actually seeing these recommendations. So again, thank you to all our work groups, and I just want to acknowledge all the time, expertise, and work that's went in between these meetings to craft what I think is a solid base for us to work from and really dig in. And so we have 25 total recommendations that have been prepared by the task force members. And at this next phase here, we're going to go through them one by one. And share out at a high level and seek feedback from task members via this pulse check I mentioned. So after each one of the recommendations is read out, we'll do a vote. This concept is fist to five, 0 to 5, to understand, to get a pulse check about where task members sit with these recommendations. With 0 being you do not support this at all, and 5 you strongly support with no additional discussion needed at all. And I would note that a lot of these recommendations, because of the subject matter we're tackling, are pretty complex. And I know there's going to be a desire for us to sort of really dig in and get in the weeds. We don't really have, that's really not the objective here with at this stage, is to get deep in the weeds, but we do want to get that pulse check, and we should have time, like if we want sort of or need one clarifying question or a clarification from the group that submitted it. I'm just going to kind of lead that as we go through, and don't hesitate to sort of speak up or raise your hand. We'll just sort of try to get through this together, but it's really important that we get through all 25 recommendations to get this pulse check. And so we're just going to have to kind of see how it goes, but I'm going to try to, we just can't really get too far into the weeds to make sure that we get through all the recommendations and get to the next stage of this. Are there any brief questions just about this process?
I guess I do have just a quick question, because I know all of these recommendations that might not be fully fleshed out. So how are you thinking about that when we're voting on something when all of the recommendations might not be fully fleshed out? Is it just like the direction that it's going? What are we using as a baseline of what we're voting on?
A really good question. So is there a way to back up to that slide with the fist of 5 one more time? So it might be worth, I'm just going to go through each of these, and please take a look. We're trying to assess, how much the cake is baked with each of these recommendations and how much more work we might need. So, for example, one finger, no, do not support changes unless substantial changes are made. Well, if we have a recommendation and over half the group is putting up a 1 there, that tells us, and it will tell this, we'll have an opportunity for then the small groups to go back and work and assess, well, should we just toss this one, or do we need to take feedback from the task force to substantially retool it? And so having this spectrum of 0 to 5, I think will give us that pulse check on each of these. Maybe some are closer to a final product than others. And so we'll have basically a little bit more information from the whole task force to decide, next steps for our small groups, how they want to work on, clarifying, finalizing recommendations. Does that help answer your question a little bit, Shannon?
Yes, thank you. I see 2 more questions.
All right, Commissioner Zhang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the challenge I have with this exercise right away is just also some recommendations seem to be made based off on our current environment, right? Based off on current funding streams. So I think I have a challenge with that, because I think the overall consensus would be we need more funding, and we need like specific type of programming that would support these specific needs. So I think I just have that challenge that I'm grappling with here.
Yeah, thanks for naming that. I think it's important that this task force has recommendations that meet the scope of the challenge we're up against, which means proposing new funding, I would say, as some of these recommendations do, or increased funding. But to your point, we're also living in a political environment where there are limited resources. And so, that's why I think I appreciate that we have recommendations that both are funding and ones that are small amount of funding or policy or administrative. Just given the scope of the challenge, I think we need to be in the yes and mode. But I wouldn't encourage folks to sort of, out of fear that there isn't available funding, rate of funding place lower. I think we need to be in the place of, are these recommendations warranted? Are they helpful? Will they help solve the problems? I think that's where headspace should be. And, some of the sort of political calculation of what's easier, harder lifts, I almost feel like that's a next phase kind of conversation, if that's helpful. And I'd seen a hand, I think, from somebody else, but
Yeah,
maybe down again.
yeah, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I have, and maybe I'm alone, but some of the same concerns that Commissioner Zhang mentioned, and it's so hard. There's so many things where I'd be like, yeah, I'm in 100%, but I know the structure of our system right now, it's like, it's not even remotely realistic. And it's hard sometimes to go through these because they are so specific, and it almost feels a little bit like I'd like to back up one or two big steps and figure out how do we set the structure. So you sort of addressed that in your last comment there was, how do we address those? Because I'd like to be talking about how do we start at the base blocks here, because we're too far up the pyramid for me. Maybe I'm the only one that feels that. It's not that it's not worth going through some of these ideas, but it's very difficult for me to visualize, just being in this industry, like how these are actually going to come to fruition. So I don't need you to respond. You sort of addressed it, but I do think as a group, unless I'm the only one that feels that way, I'd like to be spending a little bit of time on that kind of stuff, on the real basic building blocks of forget about where we are and what we have and what our limitations are now. How do we get this thing sort of rebuilt? Because we need to.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. Part of the nature of our task force and our finite amount of time and space, I think you sort of name some of that challenge with such a complex issue that we're trying to tackle. I am hopeful that these recommendations in this process can, some of the previous work can inform that kind of base building that we've done. And but you name something that's absolutely accurate, that I think we are still grappling with a lot of the whole versus the individual solutions. I would note that some of the systems level change recommendations, I think, try to get a little bit at some of the whole piece. And so, again, I sort of feel like yes and. But I'm going to keep us moving, if that's all right, unless there's any other burning questions. And we'll start going through the recommendations. And we'll just start moving. And if folks have questions, be sure to use the chat as well, because we can capture some of that feedback for questions that we don't have time to really dig into. And we may have time as well. So use both the chat function and the hand function, and we'll just kind of get moving and see how the process goes. All right. So let's see here. Not sure. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so we are going to start with draft recommendation number 1. Please read it, but I'll just read the core of it for those watching at home and listening. And draft recommendation 1 for financing, finance tools and programs is adequate service funding is paired with capital funding for permanent supportive housing units, both new and existing permanent supportive housing units. And under that, a few specifics that folks can read. Are there any quick, okay, let's go right to the poll here. And once we have votes recorded, we'll have Evelyn give us a readout and an opportunity for some engagement, especially if we're picking up some 1s and 2s and 0s. All right. 3s, 4s, and 5s.
Yep, we have 3 votes for 3, 8 votes for 4, and 5 votes for 5.
All right. So that is, and I would say too, just because something's, I think this means it's in a good place. It doesn't mean it's anywhere near done, and there's more work to do, but that helps us kind of get a sense, and it helps give that our small group a sense. And so, I'm just for ones that have sort of 3, 4s, and 5. Oh, I do have a question here. Shannon.
Sorry, my question is, when I'm looking at this, it looks like a recommendation from another one. Was there a way of prior to of even like simplifying and combining recommendations if they were across teams? Because I know there's crosswalking happening, and so
Super good question. And I've had some discussions with some task force members and staff about this. After we do this exercise, there definitely is going to be some overlap and some work that needs to be done to sort of combine and make sure that we have sort of synergy across them. And so our hope is to sort of get through this process, and then in the small groups have some discussion about where maybe some of those overlap pieces are. But there will need to be some work from the small groups, from the task force as a whole, to do some of that combining work. And so for everybody, as you're reviewing these recommendations, if you see areas where you feel like there's overlap, especially overlap across recommendations, just maybe make a note of that. And as we get to further recommendations, it might even be worth like throwing in the chat, this looks similar to recommendation X, and we can have our staff grab some of those and kind of get that running list to help us further combine and do the work, because I think that'll be needed. All right, and Andrea just put in the chat, this one overlaps with 16 from administrative. That's great kind of feedback and gives us some ability to post-meeting take a look. All right, let's go to number 2. We're moving. Oh, did we lose at least on my screen, I've lost the PowerPoint. Oh, here we go. Draft recommendation number 2. The Commissioner of Human Services shall identify a strategy to address the health and long-term stability of supportive housing projects in Minnesota through new, expanded, and/or accessible sources of funding related to Medicaid. This could include services reimbursed under Section 115 of the Social Security Act. All right, we'll put the poll up.
We have 2 votes for 2, 7 votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, and 2 votes for 5.
All right, since we have a couple 2s, I am wondering if somebody who rated it a 2 want to just provide a little feedback for us. What sort of, why ranking it a 2? What are the sort of concerns? Let's try to surface some of those if we can.
Representative Howard, this is Peter from Commerce. I ranked it 2, not because I don't think this is a good idea. I actually think it's a really good idea. I just think now in the soon-to-be current former or federal environment, that this might be a much more difficult thing to pursue. So it was a how realistic would this be over the next 4 years vote, rather than the merits of the idea, which I think are really promising.
Got it. That's helpful.
Hi, this is Elizabeth. I also did a 2, and I also am not supportive. It says under 2, I'm not supportive, but that's not true. I am supportive of the concept. I just need a lot more information. I don't really understand how it would work, and it does seem a lot more complex. So I agree with Peter on that.
does someone that made the recommendation want to provide just like a 30-second or a minute overview of kind of the thinking behind this recommendation?
Yes, I can do a little bit. This is not my area of expertise, but I know that this is something that the Task Force on Strengthening the Supportive Housing Model is also looking at and working on. And this one is really complex. There have been a number of states that have sought and received approval for the flexible use of this 1115 waiver. And one of the reasons why our group came up with it is because rather than requiring state appropriations, it actually brings service funding to permanent supportive housing. So it uses, it allows our system to tap into an underutilized potential resource. So that's one of the reasons why we thought it was really important to bring forward, so that we can, not everything is totally dependent on state money, but something that we can do together. And there's really good models for it. So we know that there's at least 5, there's probably more than that, but at least 5 states have been successful in getting this approval, and it has turned out to be a really meaningful funding source for permanent supportive housing projects. And we have, like, in our actual worksheet, we have a ton of details in there. So I think just reading through that would not be a good use of time. But if those worksheets are available, this is one that probably requires a little bit more of a read through, because it is pretty like techy and wonky.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think, that's good feedback for our small group on number 2. And we'll go to number 3 now. I'm not seeing the PowerPoint again. All right, draft recommendation number 3. QAP and other public RFP funding structure and selection criteria revisions based on performance data and preservation goals. Selection criteria, I'm not going to read that. On this one, I might ask the recommender to provide a 30-second, 45-second overview of this recommendation, because it does look pretty technical.
I can take a stab at that. So the idea here is about looking at the data and looking around performance in permanent supportive housing models. And if what we're finding is that the models that are 100% or majority permanent supportive housing, if those models tend to work better than the integrated model. So that would be requiring basically everything that, that would prioritize everything that comes through most of the funding sources under the consolidated RFP, to include a few or some minimum number of permanent supportive housing units, or units that would serve persons experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. So it's really about, is this model working? Is the integrated model working? Or is it bringing a level of uncertainty and potential distress to that subset of properties? Because going back to, and this is tied to recommendation 1, which is that as of now, service funding and operations funding is not always tied to permanent supportive housing capital funding. And so the idea here is that let's focus on the majority or 100% permanent supportive housing models for a number of reasons, including related to performance, related to better ability to get and retain service funding, and move away from this integrated model that requires basically that a lot of projects sign up for, because it's important to score enough points to get funded. Someone on my team may be able to do a better job with that, so please chime in.
No,
I can just add to what Andrea said real quick. So the integrated model, let's say it is 10% PSH, 90% just general affordable, whether it's 30, 50, or 60% AMI, but let's say it's 50 or 60 just to be kind of pretty standard. The impact in particular when you're dealing with that integrated approach is what it does to the other 90% of the units from a rent standpoint, operating expense standpoint, turnover standpoint, and it does result in more significant gaps on the other 90% of the units. Having that integrated approach, therefore, more taxpayer dollars, more subsidies that are needed with the integrated approach. Even though you're only delivering under that integrated approach 10% of the units at the PSH, versus doing 100% in the same building, you can provide better efficiencies. And the integrated approach does have good outcomes, but it also is a more expensive approach. And that's really, I think, from my viewpoint, what this contemplates is driving better efficiencies to deliver the critical PSH units that we need across our state. The integrated approach is less efficient.
All right, let's move to a vote on this.
We have 1 vote for 1, 1 vote for 2, 4 votes for 3, 5 votes for 4, and 4 votes for 5.
Great. If we could hear from our ones and our twos.
I'll jump in on this one. So I am a lower vote for this one, and this was a really good discussion with the small group that we had. I mean, this is one of those topics that could be a task force in and of itself to evaluate the efficacy of permanent supportive housing, both integrated and primarily permanent supportive housing, and just recognizing that there is such a range of needs for permanent supportive housing, both in integrated models and in 100% permanent supportive housing models. And the questions that come up for me really around the adequacy of funding to allow them to be successful versus whether this type of integration should be paused or changed from some public policy standpoint. So I think it's a really complex area. Like some of these areas, very complex, and I just pause at the idea of pausing on integrated models.
All right, Commissioner Zhang. Thought I saw a hand there for commissioners. Maybe I.
Sorry, I muted myself. I was speaking without unmuting myself.
I got it.
In St. Paul, we have models where we do have 100% permanent supportive housing, and some right now they are in need of a lot of help. And I think we also have to do a better job of defining what this permanent supportive housing definition is right now, because some of the housing affordability levels that we're talking about is like 60%, 50% AMI. Those are really right now, it's just affordable housing for the metro. Like that's just where working class people, their income levels are at. And so just to be able to have stable housing, they're not going to need additional services. It's just what their income is. So I just really have concerns about pausing an integrated model.
All right, thank you. We will keep moving. Draft recommendation number 4. Okay, this is another big one. Develop policy framework with small p preservation of affordable housing. And then a list of what this policy framework should include. I would invite someone to kind of just describe this in 30 seconds or a minute in terms of what we're trying to do here and what you want task force members to kind of take from this recommendation.
James, you want to take this one?
Sure. I mean, just very briefly around the framework. So a number of the people on the task force are familiar with the consolidated RFP, which is one of the primary sources for both new construction and preservation, but it tends to be big preservation projects. So capital P preservation, much more expensive, much more intensive. And so developing another track where it's existed in limited ways, where there can be some more targeted small P preservation, so more asset management, keeping projects going. And this actually connects to a couple of the different categories that we have within our group, but there isn't a really good framework to help differentiate between those tracks or necessarily the funding sources dedicated behind them. So that's very high level that touches on a couple of things within our group.
Got it.
And we just affectionately refer to as big P preservation, the big projects, and small P preservation, important but smaller.
All right, let's move to a vote here.
We have 1 vote for 3, 9 votes for 4, and 5 votes for 5.
All right. Well, we'll keep moving for ones that were in a place like this. Draft recommendation number 5. Identify strategy, tools, and funding resources to address the small P preservation and/or stabilization asset management needs of existing affordable housing, with some specific recommendations. I think we can just go to a vote on this one, unless let's just do that. Yep.
We have 1 vote for 3, 4 votes for 4, and 11 votes for 5.
All right. Good feedback from the group on that recommendation. We'll move to number 6, regulatory relief. As part of new policy framework for small P preservation of affordable housing, if resources are not sufficient to preserve or stabilize existing affordable housing, identify options for relief from regulatory requirements. Let's move to a vote on this one.
We have 1 vote for 2, 2 votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, and 7 votes for 5.
All right, who's our 2? And if somebody doesn't want to share, that's all right. But if possible, if you're the 2, it would be good to make sure you're providing that feedback to the small group, if sort of offline is how you'd prefer to share that feedback.
All right. Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I have a quick question about the small P. Is this for small projects, right? If I'm tracking this conversation right, like P preservation for like small, like limited number of affordable housing units in a building.
I'm gonna take a danger of being, someone correct me, but I think, often when we refer to like capital P preservation, it's like a significant preservation project, millions and millions of dollars. I think small P preservation might be like an organization really needs to repair a roof. Or, but smaller scale kind of preservation needs that don't necessarily fit as neatly into how we currently fund preservation projects where when we think of traditional preservation, there's an RFP process, and you get a big chunk to do a big thing.
Okay. I guess just how it's framed right now, it's like I first thought that like yes, I would be supportive of something like this if it's like for smaller scale projects, but if they're for like large scale projects that did receive public support for it, I actually would be very against this because um, preservation is always going to be most cost efficient versus us trying to put online those new affordable units, right? So to me, I would be very against this because we are taking affordable units offline, and then we are missing that, and we would have to build new ones to meet that need.
Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in and say that I don't think that that is the intention of this recommendation or really what the result would be either. So, so anyway, I think it's the idea again is that this would be part of a policy framework, that there would be a waterfall of like, these are all the interventions that we could do. And, the priority would be to preserve everything we possibly can. But what if there isn't enough resources? What do we do? Do we allow those buildings to just completely deteriorate to the point where they become functionally obsolete, or we lose them anyway because we don't have the resources to invest? Would be how I would just qualify that one.
I'll jump in just with one note too. The reduction in the 4D tax rate from 0.75 to 0.25 was a tremendous tool for facilitating long-term preservation of affordable housing. I agree completely that it is critically important that we identify pathways to preserve what we have and reinvest in what we have first and foremost. It is much more expensive to build new affordable housing than it is to preserve existing affordable housing. We, of course, need to be doing both, but the preservation focus, the reinvestment focus long term really is what can move the needle in a very impactful way. So I just wanted to note those things. The 4D tax rate reduction was the most significant tool in really helping drive preservation and doing it in a very cost-effective way. So big thanks once again for that tool being brought forward recently to reduce the tax rate, and that is going to have significant benefits to the residents, to affordable housing. That's in the rear view mirror, so I won't spend any more time talking about it.
And we'll move to number 7, and I'm going to note that we're about halfway through the time we've allotted for this exercise. We're not halfway through the recommendation, so I'm going to encourage folks and myself to help us move a little quickly and to really utilize the chat, which we can use to kind of surface things that we want to and need to. Draft recommendation number 7, statewide preemption on rent control with no local municipality override. And we can go to a vote on this.
We have 1 vote for 0, 2 votes for 1, 1 vote for 2, 2 votes for 3, 2 votes for 4, and 5 votes for 5.
So this is one with more opposition. Maybe I'll invite one person to share, but I think some good feedback just on the vote here. And I guess I could go. I did rate one of them as a 2. I think the state's role in this is worth while having a conversation. For the purview of this task force, I think I have some hesitancy about the kind of slippery slope that gets into a talk about preemption generally. And so like I rank it lower in part because of that, less on sort of the merits of what some of those local policies have done and meant. But it sort of happened. Statewide preemption on anything locally opens up a huge can of worms that feels to me a little outside our scope. Number 8.
I'm happy to just jump in for 10 seconds on this.
Yep.
I did rate it a 5, really as a result of it being a no cost, low cost solution that would have absolutely, without doubt, a tremendous impact on the tax base, not just in housing, but in other sectors as well, from office to industrial to retail, in a beneficial way that'll help reduce tax rates, increase assessed values, and provide the state with increased tax revenue to address many solutions that require funding. This solution is one that I hope can be discussed further amongst this group. It's one that could have a tremendous benefit in serving many other solutions and recommendations that are on the table.
Thank you. And I'll note we are going to have a process. It's very natural for some of these recommendations to have people in different places on. I mean, the best ability, yeah, we want to work towards consensus, but there'll probably be time and place for us to have votes on certain proposals, and what rises to the top and doesn't is a function of the product of this entire work group. So we'll move on to the next recommendation, draft recommendation number 8. A proclamation on importance of partnerships between state, county, and local public safety departments, resources to drive public safety.
We have 1 vote for 0, 1 vote for 1, 1 vote for 2, 6 votes for 3, 4 votes for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
Sorry, I froze for a second. I'm having a potential internet issue. Did we get the vote on the screen? Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay, a few 0, 1s, and 2s. Would there be somebody that rated 0 or 1 or 2 that would want to share their perspective?
I just shared. I think it's an important proclamation to make. I don't know if it needs a lot of it feels like something that should already be said and stated and understood. And it's like putting an exclamation point on something of systems already doing what they should be doing and they're not. So while I think it's important for public safety, I don't know if the energy that we have in this task force belongs here.
I'll just add, I voted 2, just in part because just the term proclamation maybe isn't strong enough. If there's a way to sort of strengthen a recommendation that feels more actionable in a way that'll provide impact on public safety, I think that would be my recommendation to this group. Continue to work on a public safety recommendation, but one that sort of we feel has a little bit more heft behind it to get to sort of actionable results. All right, number 9. Track key performance indicators, or KPI, related to the health of the affordable housing industry. So this appears to be kind of data collection. question here. Let's go to the vote.
We have 1 vote for 1, 2 votes for 2, 9 votes for 3, 1 vote for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
So not as much support at the high level for this one. A quick comment from anybody that rated it lower?
Mr. Chair, I'm just uncertain about how this would help achieve our goal of preserving current affordable housing units. Because right now, landlords already do have the right to evict for non-payment of rent. And we see that on the back end with eviction at the eviction court.
All right.
I think I would just add in, I think it could be a really interesting data point to collect that really could be informative, as just much of affordable housing is outside of the state regulatory ecosystem. So it would be a new requirement for a lot of privately owned properties that could raise up some concerns, but there could be different advocacy organizations. I think like Minnesota Housing Partnership does a great job with some data collection in the industry. There could be other avenues to pursue that data. I think it is an interesting data point.
Yeah, I'll just add, I thought the last group I was on, the WERA working group, some really good recommendations came around about collecting data to assess the overall need, but maybe this needs a little more refining to get to a good data collection recommendation. Let's go to number 10. Close deals faster. Review models and identify opportunities for industry-wide processes and funding structures to get projects closed faster. Let's go to the vote.
We have 1 vote for 2, 4 votes for 3, 7 votes for 4, and 5 votes for 5.
Good feedback there. Quick comment from our 2. If not, we can move on and would encourage folks to share in the chat or with the work group. Any feedback? All right, number 11, create a dedicated preservation funding pool equal to new construction in the consolidated RFP. And I'll let folks just for a second read the specific details.
We have 3 votes for 2, 5 votes for 3, 4 votes for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
I can, just on the last one, I'll say, I was one of the 2s. I'd be a 5 if the part that gives me pause is the equal to new construction. I think there should be more conversation about kind of in statute or otherwise kind of that level of earmarking. But I absolutely support the thinking about new tools and new streams of resources. Let's go to the next one. Draft recommendation number 12, reestablish asset management loans. There needs to be an appropriately sized emergency funding pool that is flexible and time sensitive in order to address significant and dire capital needs. Let's go to the vote.
We have 1 vote for 2, 3 votes for 3, 5 votes for 4, and 7 votes for 5.
Would our two want to share briefly? Otherwise, we can encourage. I know when it's just one person, sometimes if folks are more comfortable sharing feedback in a different way.
I'm happy to jump in on this one.
Yep.
I'm very supportive of this general consideration, so long as there's a source to facilitate offsetting the increase in the loans being brought forward to assist these properties, and ultimately that these loans can be in a position to be repaid. I think there's other considerations, tools that could be brought forward to assist these properties. And I think what's critical here is that there's a source, an increased revenue source to cover an increased cost. And certainly what we understand and know very well is there are significant deficits out there and capital needs. And we need to make sure that on the revenue side, tax revenue side, we're bringing forward the sources to cover these increased costs.
Thank you. One quick aside as we do these recommendations, there might be thinking about a process for us to, with the funding recommendations, find a way for this group to sort of prioritize what we think is most important. We can think about ways to do that, but some of these bring up that in my mind too. Number 13, use recapitalization process to simplify project financing in order to streamline building operations and support long-term stability of the project.
One vote for 2, 5 votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, and 4 votes for 5.
Would anyone like to share, or I see there's comments in the chat too? If not, we can move to 14. All right, number 14, evaluate extended use period guidelines to release pressures after year 15. And we can go to a vote. Hopefully folks can hear me. I'm having a little internet issue, so I've put my camera off.
Five votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, 3 votes for 5.
All right, let's keep moving. Number 15. Allow, and this is in the administrative policies and tools, allow owners to fund and collect revenue for asset management. Allow affordable housing providers to include asset management fees in the underwriting costs, provide a funding pool that existing developments can access to financially support asset management functions if such fees were not underwritten.
One vote for 2, 7 votes for 3, 5 votes for 4, and 3 votes for 5. Would the number 2 like to share?
Uh, Again, apologies for a little jerkiness over here with my internet. Does anyone want to share feedback who ranked it lower? Read that too? If not, we can move to 16. Provide more flexibility on incentivizing supportive housing. In future QAPs, supportive housing units should be incentivized only when there is adequate service funding to support residents. For current projects, allow owners to pause supportive housing requirement until adequate service funding is in place.
One vote for 0, 2 votes for 2, 8 votes for 3, 1 vote for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
Wondering if some of either the person rated 0 or one of our 2s would, since we have a couple of these, would invite a little bit of discussion here.
I'm not the 0 or the 2, but I will jump in just to differentiate between looking ahead at future projects and existing operating projects with the federal low-income housing tax credit. And I'm not an attorney, so I can't advise on the technicalities, but when it comes to the federal requirements, when a project has tax credits and if agreed to certain items, it's not an administrative decision by state agencies to be able to change those retroactively. It's a lot more complex than that. So pausing sounds easy, but there isn't really a mechanism to pause requirements on old regulatory agreements that are recorded against properties. And lawyers that are involved, I'm sure, have 10 layers deeper than that they can provide. Just want to note that those are two very different things within the same context.
Mr. Chair, I'm the 0 because for current projects, because this should have been included in a part of the plan or proposal already, and they cannot commit to saying that we don't want to do this anymore because times are tough.
All right, thanks for that feedback for our administrative policies group. Number 17, retool underwriting standards to reflect current economic conditions, and I'll let folks just read the specifics.
One vote for 2, 3 votes for 3, 7 votes for 4, and 5 votes for 5.
All right. Well, let's keep moving. We'll go to number 18. Reconsider incentivizing leverage of other public resources in the competitive funding of capital housing investments. This sort of leverage increases complexity by having to negotiate with multiple government funders, each of whom bring their own policy-driven requirements to a project.
One vote for 1, 1 vote for 2, 8 votes for 3, and 6 votes for 4.
Is there either our one or our two would be willing to just say a word or two? And I see Andrea's got a comment in the chat, so shouldn't we expect public funding to put yes? Okay, so that one maybe needs some work. Number 19, systems change. If possible, use a percentage of the metro area sales and use tax for housing to fund supportive housing services. Would this fit under the use support nonprofit affordable housing owners and developers? And a few other pieces.
One vote for one, two votes for two, 9 votes for three, and 3 votes for four.
I can share because I was a 1 on this, in part because I think we might have 3 separate recommendations here. They feel varied to me. And in particular, I would have deep reservations about earmarking part of the metro sales tax, and do think that it's already under the law would be eligible use, but maybe there's more fruitful conversation about clarifying the eligible use. And then some of these others feel kind of like potential separate recommendations to me.
Possible, but I think just to give a little, the idea is how do we figure out how to fund supportive housing? And so like, what are some of the ideas? I see that coming from 16, as well as number 1 of a separate line instead of including it in the funding format of housing right now. Trying to think of ideas of where to pull funding from. And then the coordinated entry, it is separate, but it also increases the cost of supportive housing services at times when when it's not matching the organization. So coordinated entry puts someone in a housing unit that might not have the resources that that person needs. And so that's increasing costs in some of the housing providers that don't have those resources available to them. So just a little expansive on the thought process.
That's helpful for me. Like, for example, I'd probably be a 1 on the metro sales tax, but a 5 on that coordinated entry bullet. So maybe there's ways to sort of separate some of these out. All right, number 20. So this is a big one. Regulatory changes to extended use period beyond year 15. And maybe I might invite somebody that crafted this to give us the high level description of what this recommendation seeks to achieve.
Hey everybody, this one was mine, and it's very similar to 6 and 14. So essentially, it's just it's a little bit more detailed maybe, but freeing up the affordability regulation on projects after year 15 if the project is not in a condition to cash flow or function well and remain in good condition and affordable.
All right.
1 vote for 2, 5 votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
All right. Is there anyone that would like to quickly comment on this one? I'll just note I was a 3, but I just want to name that on some of these, I think all of us on this task force care deeply about preserving affordable housing. And so things like reducing requirements, I think should give us all a little bit of a, pause. But I appreciate the reference to guardrails here. But I think any of those recommendations, it's important to get in the details about what that looks like and how, because I think the goal of flexibility is a good one and probably necessary. But having that full conversation about what that means is super important. So I appreciate the level of detail in this recommendation and our further work in that, the recommendations that are kind of in that bucket. 21. Ensure both Metro and Greater Minnesota ISG groups adopt a more formal and transparent process with several recommendations.
One vote for 1, 1 vote for 2, 5 votes for 3, 3 votes for 4, and 5 votes for 5.
Would our 1 or 2 care to just offer their feedback?
I will jump in with some feedback and just say that I think that this is a good recommendation to come later after ISG is convening and meeting for some of the purposes that we've talked about in other recommendations. So, for example, I mean, right now there are no funding tools that are at the dispense of ISG. So it's kind of, I think, a little bit of some process before just is a little premature. And I mean, I think we need to focus on getting ISG up and running for this purpose before we can think about what kind of formal and transparent process makes sense. But right now, this doesn't apply because we don't have ISG set up in this way.
And I'll just say, I mean, I think I agree with the goal, and want to understand from experts like how to get to a more formal or even like how do we structurally make sure that there is like the backing for this to be less of an ad hoc process and a more formal one? It seems important, but I agree maybe there's more discussion needed. All right, number 22. Increase funding for SAHA to enable counties flexible funding to stabilize affordable housing based on local needs and priorities. Current resources are so limited they have marginal impact, and revise the existing allocation of LAHA resources to only counties and cities of the first class, thereby alleviating fragmentation of the resources across so many jurisdictions.
One vote for 1, 1 vote for 2, 4 votes for 3, 5 votes for 4, and 1 vote for 5.
I'll just share, this is another one where the two clauses are very different for me. I'm a 5 on increasing funding for local funds, but a 0 or a 1 on taking away funds from cities that are currently receiving LAHA funds. I think we need to be in kind of more of an abundance mindset, in a statewide mindset. That's just my perspective on this one. And it would invite, I think there was another 2 also. If not, let's go to 23. All right, this is from our insurance group. We have 3 from the insurance group. Direct the Department of Commerce and MHFA to partner with affordable housing providers in the insurance industry to collect data on the state of the insurance market for affordable housing providers. With more information here.
One vote for 2, 6 votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, and 2 votes for 5.
Right. Would our 2 or anyone like to offer a quick comment here? If not, we can move to 24. Create an insurance risk mitigation fund to provide affordable housing providers an avenue to invest in insurance risk mitigation improvements to facilities when resources as the property level make it difficult to make upgrades to improve the health and safety of these properties.
One vote for 1, 3 votes for 2, 8 votes for 3, 2 votes for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
Would our 1 or our 2s or someone offer some feedback? Come on, we have a couple people. Anybody, it would be helpful that I would encourage someone to speak up. Otherwise, please let our insurance group know directly. It will be helpful to get some specific feedback.
Chair Howard, I did not vote a 1, 2, or 1 or 2, but the phrase on this one that gave me a little bit of pause is the latter part, where it says where the property level, it makes it difficult to make upgrades or improve the health and safety of these properties. I was wondering how that was tied to insurance. It feels like maybe the phrasing might not be right, tying it back to repairs or something. So it was just a little puzzling to me.
Yeah, the idea behind this is, and based some other states have done something that allows basically resources for providers to make upgrades that are needed, but also updates that when you're going to an insurance company, you're able to identify less risk, and thereby hopefully kind of reducing rates and, some kind of the win-win perspective. All right, we'll go to number 25. Direct the Department of Commerce to partner with MHFA, affordable housing providers in the insurance industry to assess the benefits, costs, and feasibility of state-based financial support to mitigate excessive insurance premium increases, as well as to protect affordable housing providers that may be at risk of losing insurance coverage.
2 votes for 2, 4 votes for 3, 6 votes for 4, and 3 votes for 5.
Would invite folks to provide any feedback, especially if you rated it lower.
Well, I rated this a 2, not completely unsupportive. If we look at the way the grading system works. I just think that, I don't see us having a lot of impact here. And as a result, there's so much to do that it takes our emphasis and our focus away from things that I think we really should be spending our energy on. So that's why I rated it a 2.
Great, thank you. All right, that is the breadth of our recommendations. Thanks for going through that exercise, and it's exciting to see ideas start to move. The hope is that process is information that our small groups can digest and work together to sort of refine recommendations. And so want to provide just some kind of next steps for how we're going to proceed. You'll have until just before noon in small groups, so about a half hour. And then following today's meeting, task members will have another 2 weeks to refine and revise recommendations with updated worksheets due on Wednesday, December 4th. And we can confirm there won't be an extension on work time for this go around. We need to work back from the 4th to compile and turn it around for the task force members. The piece that is we got some very helpful information in the chat about where there's overlap across groups. And so I think that's worthy of your discussions in your small groups, and perhaps we can create kind of a report back to our staff from our small groups to help kind of maybe take a run at combining those, and then we could give kind of sort of homework for individual groups in terms of who's working on what, if we're going to consolidate a few. And so more to come on that, but I would just encourage folks in your small groups to kind of discuss where you see some of that overlap. So we have a report feedback mechanism to do some of that work offline and make sure that our groups are best prepared to enter the next phase. And just a few notes as you reconvene, what feedback and comments stood out to you? Are there recommendations the group wants to pause on or set aside? Are there any of your recommendations for grouping? And so you can sort of think like, yeah, we could sort of send that one to group X or group Y, or we want to take it. We want to, so that kind of a conversation. And then what kind of collaboration and communication over the next 2 weeks will help your group be successful. So just kind of determining, as you have been, how the best way to go about the work that comes. And I see a few questions. So Commissioner Jean.
Thank you, Chair Howard. I just want to name that in these recommendations, I don't see one where tenants are discussed about like the potential displacement. So I just wanted to name that for us to consider as a group about in these strategies about how tenants are impacted and are part of this too.
A really good comment. And one thing that we haven't discussed yet that in a previous working group that we had a bit of a process around is not just creating recommendations, but creating the sort of narrative of what this group is, the challenges we're working to solve and the broad solutions that we seek to address. And to me, that might be goal number 1 of this whole exercise, is to make sure that we are protecting and making sure that Minnesotans have safe, affordable homes and they're not at risk of displacement. And so more to come on that, but what I would hope is that a smaller subset of this task force would meet and help work to craft a narrative document that would be accompanied the report and really serve as the guide for all of the recommendations. It feels like these recommendations, we've been really technical in the weeds, point by point, but I think we need some of that overall vision to accompany these recommendations, and in itself, these recommendations don't meet all of that. Ellen.
I really appreciate all the work that went into doing this and was following along in this active chat where there were so many comments around overlapping recommendations. And I'm wondering if before our small groups get started, I mean, I didn't take any notes on all that great stuff that was appearing in the chat. And so as I'm thinking about our activities over the next 2 weeks, it feels to me like that distilling of all this information about the comments and what was concerning would be really helpful before our work groups dig into the next round of edits. In order for our work group to be spending time most efficiently and effectively in moving the ideas forward.
Yeah, so here's my thought process on this. I'm just thinking out loud. Our staff has been taking copious notes and compiling all of this. My hope is that our small groups can meet and maybe one of your group members can do a report back to the co-chairs, to myself, to send a report and our staff with sort of your reflections, questions, those kinds of things. And then with your feedback plus what's been gathered in the chat, our staff can assemble some of that feedback in one document, get that to your work group members so that it feels clearer for each of our work groups, like what the task looks like in crafting those recommendations. And I see Katie's got her hand raised too. She might have some perspective from the staff since I just volunteered more work for them. So go ahead, Katie.
Thank you, Representative Howard. Trust me, everybody, I am smiling. My internet connection is a little spotty this morning, so I'm off video. Yes, Ellen, thank you for pointing out the chat. We have been capturing that throughout this conversation, and our intent would be to compile that with also a grid that we have of all the vote tallies, as well as overall notes with comments that Jenna has been capturing from what you've been sharing verbally. Our hope would be to be able to turn that around like in the next day or so. Like we ask for your indulgence like to the end of this week, but we will work very diligently on that and maybe even send that out in parts if the whole thing isn't done. I want to amplify, Representative Howard, what you said about getting just a brief report out from each of the small groups. In particular, your sense of some of that either like grouping or combining, right? Those could be different things, right? There could just be several aligned recommendations that are together in the report, or there could be the work to synthesize, combine those, et cetera. So kind of where does each group stand in their sense of what they'd like to do there, and who would volunteer to take on more arduous task of probably like trying to combine and synthesize versus saying, hey, here are some similar ones that represent a strong theme in the work. And with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions. Okay, if not, back to you, Representative Howard.
Sorry, I got cut out there a second. Hopefully folks can hear me. I think we're ready to go to our small groups at this point, and we'll meet back at the end for last final words.
I just want to check on breakouts. Everyone here should be here, right? No one needs to move. Okay. Perfect.
Is Commissioner Zhang, is she in a group? Looks like she's in the systems change. I just still see her here. I just wanted to clarify.
He was in the group and she should be in systems change. I can
Yep,
see.
that's what I see her. Yeah.
Okay. I just moved her. So she'll hang out there.
Oh, okay. She is in there. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
I think she has not yet joined it, but she'll like sit in the in-between there.
Got
That
it.
is
Okay,
Mina
cool.
Zhang. She's the administrative assistant for the Legislative Coordinating Commission, not Commissioner Zhang.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I was seeing Commissioner Zhang was kind of hanging out in between as well, but okay. I see her in the room now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna, I don't know how to move her back.
I'll tell her she can come back.
Okay. I think she can just leave. Come back. And
I'm
I
just capturing a
can
couple of these last comments in the chat here. I think we'll be able to cobble together everything pretty well. Evelyn can also download a transcript if we of the chat.
All right, let me timing. We are when should I broadcast my you're halfway message?
Maybe at 11:50.
Okay.
I think we really only need like a minute to wrap up, so
we'll have to close at 11:58 because it gives them a 60-second countdown if that's all right.
Yep. So I guess then go at 11:49 if that's okay. And tell them they have 10 minutes, or 11:48, then they'd have 10 minutes left. Yep.
Okay. And then I can screen share again. I see someone else's. I just feel very blind in the screen share. So thank you for whoever is putting up the slide right now.
Thank you, Sam, for driving the SlideShare car.
I was writing down votes just in case as backup and to keep me connected. So if there's, I think you all got it.
Well, I missed 14 actually. So if you wouldn't mind going back in and grabbing what that was the only one when I had a connection issue, I think.
Do you want me to tell you?
Sure. Let me pull up the
I know we're on live stream, but the live stream can hear this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
We're doing business here, people. 000-563.
Okay, great.
And I can make if you have time in there, Katie, if you want to tag which group they go to, I can for the votes, make a quick visual too so they can see where the bars. I can make a bar chart for them.
Sure.
Maybe no one cares about that, but visuals sometimes help you to see the patterns of, what needs more work.
Absolutely.
It takes me 30 seconds, so it's not intensive.
Yeah, no, the table in Excel is I think all the entries are there now.
Perfect.
Although I followed your practice and didn't put zeros in. So that would be the only thing, is if zeros need to be added for the bar charts. Or if it assumes it's a zero, if it's a blank. Okay.
I think it assumes a zero. So yeah, that's fine. Awesome. I just do it because I was using a Post-it. So my columns don't line up. So the zero helps me to know that I didn't miss something.
Maybe in another minute or so, we can go and pop into the rooms. I'm happy to do that solo. Sam or Jenna, if either of you want to do that as well. Jenna, I don't want to distract you from minutes given the vigor of the conversation.
Yeah, I'm just going back and reviewing my notes right now, but let me know if you need me.
Yep.
Can I join a room if I was the creator? That's the only thing I don't want to screw up.
I think so, because I can stay in the breakout room, main room. If you do pop in, Sam, I think it'll be okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to take 1 and 2.
Okay.
Katie, you just let me know when you tell me when it's go time.
Okay, yeah, I think any time now is fine for go time. Maybe I'm thinking, why don't we cut and paste the prompts from the slide that we sent them into their breakout rooms with? I can post that in our chat here also. They just won't see that where they are right now. If that makes sense. What slide number is that?
This is the one issue that I'm having today is I can't copy out of the chat. And that's not a typical.
I couldn't either, so I've been
Okay, I was like
typing fast and furious. But I think it's working. Yeah. So what I just posted in chat here, or this is also what is on slide 40 in the deck.
Yeah, I'm gonna copy from the slide because I don't know what's going on. Okay, I'll do 1 and 2 and you'll check in on the other ones.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And if either of us get stumped, we can just come back to the main room and confer here on our Teams chat.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, we'll be back in a bit. Thanks.
Jenna, I'll just uplift if Katie's not back, but one of the groups I popped in on said they really want the vote. Oh wait, Katie's coming back. I was just sharing an update. One of the groups was ready and wanted the notes and the vote tallies for each of their items. And I said, we're working on it. We could share it now, but there's not a good avenue to get it to you and then have you make any sense of it in the very short amount of time that we have. So
yeah, no,
Yep.
we can amplify. We'll like try to, I mean, I think we should be able to have it out like tomorrow, Evelyn. I don't want to like commit you not knowing what your schedule is, but I think, you know, it shouldn't be too hard to cobble together and get out.
Yeah, I
hopefully within
agree.
the next day.
I would think we could get it out by end of day tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds good. I got to pop over to systems change really quick. I was over in insurance all that time. So
Okay.
anything else, Sam? I don't want to make sure that came up.
The other group was just talking nonstop, so I was like, "You all are good," and I'm gonna leave. So, they were
Sounds
good.
Okay, awesome. And I'm just emphasizing: make sure you figure out who your point person is to be the point of contact back to staff and co-chairs. Okay, awesome. I'll be back in a second.
All good in the other groups? And do you see there's an iPhone, or are we okay to admit?
Yeah,
that's
Evelyn,
good.
I don't know if that's Jesse Hendel or not. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, can you guys put me back in my work group? I just got kicked out.
Yeah, you are in group 1, correct? Administrative policies?
Yeah.
Okay. Should get a.
Jesse, we thought you lost you. Yeah, we did. I think she's gone, Ellen.
Oh, Joe, it looks like you maybe got bumped out to the main room.
Well, we went proactively because we were with Jesse, and then all of a sudden she disappeared.
Oh, okay.
We thought maybe you want us back because it's almost noon, but is she?
She is. We moved her over to the other room, and I can't move you back.
Ellen's here
Maybe.
too, so we got our team here. We only had 3 because Senator Port's not here today. So,
And when are we supposed to come back to the full group? Now?
I'm actually going to close them right now. So let's. If you're okay, it gives them 60 seconds, just so you know. Group there. So it should give them 60 seconds to close out. Katie and I popped into all the groups. In group 1, you were busy talking. So Katie, do you want to give the message about point person? I don't know all those
yes.
details.
Yeah, just want to make sure that amongst yourselves you determined who can be point person to give a brief report out on
there she is.
The prompt questions. Oh, is Jesse back? Oh, good.
So sorry, that was so weird. Are we all back?
Jesse, sorry if we abandoned you. You fell out, and so we thought maybe you got kicked off the other room.
Well, no, my computer screamed at me and then shut down, so I'm on my phone. Are we all here or just a few of us left?
Just the best group. They brought the best group in here personally.
Okay.
Team insurance is back. I think we're starting to filter back here.
Got it. I see. Okay.
All right. Well, everybody take a deep breath. We did a lot today. And I just want to thank everybody for your work. It's exciting to me to see just the breadth of what we're discussing and moving forward. And hope that it was helpful and productive to meet with your small groups and kind of establish next steps. And again, would encourage folks to, if you have sort of follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Senator Port directly, as well as your subgroups. But I'll just speak for myself. I'm excited where things are going, and I think we're starting. The clay is starting to take shape. It's not in its final form yet by any state, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And so with that, I will see if anyone has a motion to adjourn the meeting. Or I'll just make that motion to adjourn. Or I guess we don't. All right. With that, we're wrapped up. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.